Welcome to Iraq's Fight for Clean Air, this week's briefing on the top stories shaping Iraq. Today, we're zeroing in on the Iraqi government's newly approved environmental policies, what they mean and why they matter. So let's all take a deep breath and begin. I'm Erik Gustafson.
And I'm Omar Nidawi.
So, Omar, first off, the government just approved a set of short term and long term recommendations to address air pollution across Iraq. What prompted this, and can you walk us through the highlights of these new policies?
Yeah, the story began actually last fall or even last summer. We reported on this earlier in one of our videos. In around September and October, there were multiple days when people in Baghdad woke up to very overwhelming and overpowering smell of sulfury fumes that were coming out of industrial facilities and workshops and refineries and dumpsters surrounding the capital. And this was quite alarming for a lot of people there and prompted action, put a lot of public pressure on the government to take some action. And the government at the time took a number of measures, including sending security forces to shut down factories and workshops. And there was talk about moving the Dora refinery away from the capital. But also, I think there was an effort to get to the bottom of this, and the government instructed the Ministry of Environment to conduct a report or to prepare a report about the situation to try and analyze the causes and provide recommendations. So the measures that were approved earlier this week were contained in that report by the Ministry of Environment. And they were divided into two groups, short-term and long-term measures. And the short-term measures focused on increased resources for monitoring of air quality, the increased staffing, the development of a national center for collecting and processing data on air quality, as well as more cooperation between the Ministry of Environment and security forces to ensure that violating businesses are checked or shut down when they are polluting. And there was also a measure that requires basically polluting industries to install emission control systems in order to reduce the amount of noxious gases coming out of their facilities. There were also long-term measures and plans that are included there in the document, and those focus on reviewing and updating legislations for environmental protections, the provision of low sulfur fuels for industries to replace current fuels and reduce the amount of pollution. Also, support for research efforts and support for more afforestation initiatives to plant more trees and try to reduce the effects of deforestation on climate. And also ambitious plans for better waste management, approaching zero waste and improving recycling efforts. So there's a lot going on there, a lot of ambitious plans for both the long-term and the short-term phases.
That's very encouraging. Of course, we'll have to see if the policies are implemented. With that in mind, we know that one of the biggest challenges in Iraq is enforcement. So, what obstacles may impede the realization of these plans and policies?
Well, I think there are a number of key obstacles there that could disrupt the implementation. And I think top among them is difficulty of enforcement. And that relates to a number of things. I think key among those is that there's going to be cost for businesses to comply with these regulations, to install these emission reduction systems or measures in their businesses, to switch to better, cleaner fuels. And that's going to disrupt the economic activity and could also trigger a backlash from the public or backlash from entrenched interests. Again, a lot of businesses are connected to powerful political and militia entities. So that's a big problem, is going to be how to enforce this and how to ensure compliance. A big problem, I think, is going to be, or a big challenge is going to be funding. the Environment Ministry, the Ministry of Environment, is one of the least funded entities or the least funded ministries in Iraq. The total budget for 2023 was about 112 billion Iraqi dinars, which is about $80 million. That is not sufficient to fund this kind of ambitious plan. So we're going to need to see a significant increase in funding. And Iraq, is dealing with a chronic economic crisis. The resources are limited or at best steady, but obligations and commitments are growing. So it's going to be challenging for the government, I think, to increase funding in a meaningful way. And I think last but not least is the fact that there will be elections down the road by the end of this year, and government change could change priorities. So it is not guaranteed that the next administration is going to continue the effort to pursue this kind of environmental protections.
It sounds like, just as an aside, that there's a role for civil society and the population to be involved. Citizen science, where people are collecting and monitoring air quality, reporting on cancers at their local hospital or within their community. That could certainly also help, because I think this is something that every Iraqi has an interest in.
Absolutely, yes.
So thank you, Omar. Now, here are this week's top developments from our latest Iraq report, available at enablingpeace.org. This week, the Kurdistan regional government made new accusations of Baghdad. Among the accusations, that the Iraqi federal government was preparing to unilaterally take control of oil and gas resources in disputed territories without mentioning specific fields. Prime Minister Sudani visited the UK, yielding a number of major agreements, including a possible BP deal for Kirkuk. And by the way, directly related to this, the main topic for today's video, there was also discussion about work on clean energy, sustainable practices. Dakar Governor Mortada al-Ibrahimi was sacked by the provincial council. And Iraq is expediting a 50 million cubic feet per day natural gas project at the Ratawi field outside Basra, a part of a larger effort with Total to capture natural gas and meet Iraq's domestic energy needs. And security forces established new coordination channels with the Syrian Democratic Forces and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham to reinforce border security. Before we wrap up, we want to acknowledge that today, January 17th, marks the 33rd anniversary of the 1991 Gulf War. I served in that conflict as a U.S. Army soldier, and it's a day that I will never forget. Omar, you were in Iraq at the time, on the receiving end of a lot, and you were quite young. Do you have any memories of that moment?
Oh, I will never forget waking up at 2:35 a.m. to the deafening sound of anti-aircraft cannons, hundreds of them, and the frequent explosions that were taking place. I was 11 at the time. My family spent the rest of the war mostly outside of Baghdad with family and friends outside the capital. The moment we came back, it became clear that life after the war was not going to be the same, and that the reality of Iraq is changing forever.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'm glad that you and your family made it through that. It's important that we recognize the toll that the conflict took on countless lives. Let's continue working toward a more peaceful future for Iraq, the region, and our one and only planet. That's all for this week's briefing. For more news and analysis on Iraq, visit us at enablingpeace.org. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, click that bell for notifications, and share us with others who, like you, have Iraq in their stories. Until next time, masalama.